we were tired of losing, and it showed.
That was Rockets coach Stephen Silas last night after his team snapped a 12-game losing streak, rallying at home in the second half to defeat Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies. Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again into the Fox 26 Sports Stream. We do it every Monday night just after 7 o'clock. As always, I'm Sal Manine, sports producer here at Fox 26. There's a variety of ways you can find us on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, Twitter, and of course our website, fox26houston.com. As the Rockets, who picked up a big win last night, are in action right now in Miami, second half of a back-to-back. So we'll keep you updated on that. And then, of course, the calendar has officially flipped to March, and in the sports world, that means college basketball. The postseason already underway, and a few local teams looking to make some noise in the college ranks, of course, with the nationally ranked UH Cougars men's basketball team at the top of that list. So we'll get into some of that as things roll along. But as I mentioned, the Rockets playing right now, the first quarter just about to end, and it is Houston 32, Miami 25. Again, waning seconds of the first quarter there as the Rockets picked up just their 16th win of the season last night, but it looked like they really started to find another gear. Head coach Stephen Silas said last night's game was the best game he had ever seen Christian Wood play. And this is going back to when he worked with him before even coming to the Rockets, not just Christian Wood's time in a Houston uniform, but going up against a very physical front court in Memphis, led by Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark. Christian Wood did everything that you would want from him, not just his offensive skill set, which is well documented to this point, but really one of the best defensive games he has played in his young NBA career and certainly in his young Rockets career. So while it's not going to move the needle as far as the Rockets aren't going to the playoffs and they don't want to mess around and win too many games and hurt their chances in the lottery for a high draft pick, it was yet another step in the right direction for the development of a very young team. As well as Christian Wood played, and Stephen Silas said that Rockets fed off that, it was their backcourt that really kick-started things in the second half. Kevin Porter Jr. had 19 of his game-high 29 points in the third quarter alone, and then Jalen Green continuing to show that he's getting it as a rookie, continuing. Remember, we talked last week about what a strong month of February he had, and he too had another very strong game and really is showing the progression from early on in the season, specifically with not trying to force the action in a settled offensive situation where early on we know what kind of athleticism he has. We know what kind of confidence he has for being such a young rookie at that. And he would at times try to barrel into the lane and take on 2-3 guys. And there's not many players who can finish through that type of contact, certainly not a rookie. And you're not really going to get the benefit of the doubt that, say, an old Rockets 2-guard used to get when he would go into the lane and be going up against 2 or 3 guys at once. And so Jalen even mentioned that last night, that he started to really work on developing his mid-range game, but also not forcing the issue when he knows that teams are trying to run him off the three-point line and then they want to drop back and let him try to get into the lane and get amongst the trees. He hit really a dagger 3 over Brandon Clark in the final seconds of the game that is really what iced it as Houston was able to snap that 12-game losing streak. Let's get a little more from Stephen Silas on just how big this growth has been over the last handful of weeks, and certainly culminating and finally getting a win last night over the Memphis Grizzlies.
When everybody contributes to a win and feels good leaving the locker room with whatever they did is important for morale. It's important for us going forward, and it's important just for the organization as a whole, because I believe in this group. And I was telling them before the game that they had the Phoenix-Milwaukee game on, and that was such a high-level game. And I was telling the team, like, we're going to get to these high-level games like this. But both teams, I remember, like Middleton, when he was young, he wasn't even getting in the games. He was like working out 3 hours before games and, getting DMPs and inactive, wearing suits, and he's playing in these huge games now. And both teams, I think Phoenix had a 19-win year, and Milwaukee had a 15-win year. And they both grew, and they all got older and better, and they became, two of the best teams in the league. So that was one of my messages to the group before the game is we can get there. It might take us a little while, but we have to stay the course and stay with who we are and what we do well.
And that really is a great analogy. We talked going back to last year's NBA Finals about the Phoenix Suns and the similarities that you saw between the way that team is constructed now and maybe how the old James Harden, PJ Tucker, Clint Capella, CP3, even Rockets era teams were constructed. But as far as the fact that we're even talking about Phoenix in the NBA Finals and now a threat to go to the NBA Finals yet again, it doesn't seem like that long ago that they were considered one of the laughing stocks of the league, or certainly a cellar dweller. That everybody knew they had Devin Booker and he's a special talent and special offensive force, but what did they have around him? Where was this team going? And then they were slowly able to add the pieces, add a lot of those first round picks, and then all it took was just getting that final piece in Chris Paul, and there they are right back at the top of the NBA world, and certainly one of the short list of contenders to make it back to the NBA Finals. So that's at least the roadmap that the Rockets are hoping to follow, that they got some of these young players as they had to hit a hard reset on the franchise, and the way things are looking now, they're still likely to end up with a very high draft pick. Is they are technically half the game ahead of Orlando as I look at the standings right now for the worst record in the league. But remember, if you finish in the bottom three in terms of record, you have the same odds as far as landing the number one overall pick. So the Rockets get another top 5 pick, let's say, and Brooklyn, whose pick they do own as part of that Harden trade package, they are currently find themselves in the play-in right now. So if things were to somehow go disastrously for Brooklyn over these final few weeks of the regular season, who knows how high that pick could end up. And this is looking like another draft that there's going to be multiple options at the top, that if the Rockets can come away with a Jabari Smith or a Chet Holmgren or a Jaden Ivey, whoever the final pick ends up being, it's just another guy that you try to work into the mix and see what you got. And if you are able to eventually land on a Devin Booker type, a Giannis Antetokounmpo type, who, again, Milwaukee, as Coach Silas alluded to, not that long ago, they were considered rudderless, and where were they going? What did they have to build around? Oh, then they found Giannis and he developed into this star, but he needed more weapons around him. And now Chris Middleton, an A&M product, is turned himself into an all-star and one of the better playoff performers in the league, as we saw last year. So again, Rockets picked up a win, still on course to likely get a high draft pick and in action right now. 9:49 left to go in the first half. Rockets up 36-30 there in Miami. So we will have those highlights for you tonight on Fox 26 News at 9. And then, of course, all week we will be talking about the NCAA Tournament, which is set to begin in men's and women's basketball next week. The UH men, of course, wrapped up a very busy week over the weekend. They lost last night, got blown out on the road to Memphis, but that was their 4th game in 8 days, playing against a desperate Tigers team. And UH had already locked up the number 1 seed in the conference tournament, the outright regular season American Athletic Conference championship. So you have to wonder just how much tired legs and the fact that you were going up against a team playing for its NCAA tournament lives in Memphis, how much that all played a role. And Kelvin Sampson seemed to allude to that yes, his team did make a lot of mistakes and he would have liked to have come away with the win. But here's what he had to say yesterday after the regular season ended in a blowout loss on the road against Penny Hardaway's Memphis Tigers.
We're 26-5. We're 15-3. We had a great year. I'm really proud of this bunch. I'm mad at them right now and I can fuss at them right now, but you know what? We had a great year, but I'm proud of my team for what they've accomplished this season, the circumstances they were in, to win 26 games, whether it's injuries or depth, whatever, fatigue. I mean, they battled through a lot of stuff this year. We finished 15-3, 7-2 on the road, 8-1 at home. We're not holding our heads down. We're holding our heads high, and we look forward to going to the conference tournament this weekend.
And so as the top seed, UH gets a bye in the first round. They're off until Friday. They will play at noon up in Fort Worth at the Dickies Arena. They'll get the winner of the 8-9 matchup between Cincinnati and East Carolina, two teams who they've already taken care of. And as long as UH avoids injury and they use this time to rest up, which they obviously needed again after having to play 4 games in 8 days due to the schedule changes as a result of COVID early on in the season, the bracket sets up that they should be able to advance to Sunday's championship game, where it would likely be either SMU or Memphis a third time around. And so we'll see if form holds and if U of H is able to return to the conference title game. And if they do get another crack at Memphis, is the third time the charm. And you don't really have kind of the same excuses as maybe this last one, where at that point you would think Memphis is probably comfortably into the dance. And if it is SMU who they have to play, that's a team who they split the regular season series with, but they, like the Tigers, are still trying to play their way into the field of 68. So it would certainly be a tough test, and we'll have to see just how that unfolds. As to just what is going to happen for the Cougs in the NCAA tournament, they fell in the national rankings after Sunday's blowout loss, only dropped a few spots, checking in at 18 in the national top 25 polls. At this point, you just want to get into the field of 68, and that's something that Coach Sampson talked about at great length earlier in the week, that it doesn't really matter at this juncture about the little number that's next to your name, that there's a reason that they call it March Madness. And you've seen very good teams go home early. You've seen teams that you did not expect play into the second, third weekend of the NCAA tournament. So here's Coach Sampson. Again, it is a bit long, but definitely insightful about playing this time of year and getting set for the NCAA tournament, and where will they be seated, how high, how low. The computers really like U of H. A lot of people say, oh, well, who have they beaten? Memphis punked them twice. Is Memphis actually the best team in the American? At this point, you just want to get into the field of 68 and see what happens. So here's Coach Sampson on that and a whole lot more.
I think this is my 18th team I've taken to the NCAA tournament. We made the Sweet 16 as a 13 seed. It's your matchup. Who you match up with. There's some teams that would be bad matchups for us. Maybe a one and done. Or just play one game and go home because of the matchup, and you have a great seed. Every year there's a 12 and a 5 game where the 5 seed loses. It's not because that's an upset. It's because that's a tough matchup for that 5 seed. I've watched some certain teams, I'm not going to call their names, would be really tough matchups for us that people would say, well, if we lose them, it'll be an upset. No, it wouldn't be. No, that's a hard matchup for us. Whereas a higher seed, we may be a tough matchup for them. So I just think when the bracket comes out, the first thing you look at is the seeds is for the media and the fans, and I say that appropriately. It's not for the coaches and the players. We don't care. You know, now I'd rather be a 2 seed than a 16 seed, don't get me wrong. But really, just, you know, the year that Michigan don't hit that shot, you know what our seed was? 6. They were a 3. Did the seed matter when the ball was in the air? No, the seed means nothing, really. And I'm not saying that to act like I'm not answering your question. I mean that. Seeding for coaches that have been around a long time, that have coached in the tournament, advanced, all that stuff, doesn't matter. I'm much more interested in the style of play of the team we're playing against, because you know, that's why nobody ever gets the brackets right. Teams that pick those brackets, it's impossible, because you say, well, I picked this upset. Well, it wasn't an upset. It's an upset because you looked at the number in front of the school's name and you assumed they were better. They're not. You know, it's just, I just don't get, I've always listened to the talking heads talk about, we had a major upset today. And guys that's in the business that knew their players and their style, you just roll your eyes. That was not an upset, dude. That team's better. It wasn't their fault that they got the wrong seed.
And that's why you just want to get into the dance at this juncture. And UH profiles as a team that will give a lot of opponents a lot of trouble because of the fact that they play such hard defense, because of the way that they crash the offensive boards, because they aren't relying on solely one guy, that if they want to pound it inside to Josh Carlton or Fabian White, they can do that. If they need to rely on their guards a bit more, they can try to play that way on offense. But again, as we've seen this year with Memphis, who beat them twice, that's a team who it looks like UH just doesn't match up as well with as they do other teams. So you'll have to see what the final bracket holds. And again, it's the cliche, but it is true. That's why they call it March Madness. Before I moved back home to Houston, I spent years covering the old Big East and the ACC, and you would hear the same refrain from Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, Jim Calhoun. You just want to get into the dance and then see what happens. And you've seen even some of the best programs, some of the best teams, the teams who going in, you think, yeah, they're going all the way. They're going to the Final Four, and they lose in the first or second round. I mean, we all saw the tribute to Coach K over the weekend, his final game at Cameron Indoor Stadium, and as illustrious as his career has been. And when you see things like that, it's easy to, we tend to think, oh, well, yeah, Duke goes to the Final Four every single year in men's basketball. No. Jason Tatum's team did not go to the Final Four. Zion Williams' team did not go to the Final Four. I saw a lot of times where Jim Boeheim's Syracuse teams would barely make it into the field of 68, be a double-digit seed, and yet they would end up making a run to the Final Four, like the last time that it was held here in Houston, just because that 2-3 zone was a unique matchup that teams weren't ready for. So yes, U of H getting blown out and not looking like they were on the same level as Memphis in Sunday's matchup doesn't look great, but I wouldn't, if I'm a Cougs fan, be concerned that, oh, this means that UH is going to be one and done, nor would I say, oh, well, you went to the Final Four last year, you won the AAC regular season crown, you're going deep into the tournament again. No, it's all going to come down to what is the actual matchup when the brackets come out on Selection Sunday, and then you need a little bit of luck sometimes. If Jordan Poole's three from just inside of half court, almost 38, 40 feet, whatever that was a few years ago when UH played Michigan. Michigan was the higher seed, and it looked like plucky little U of H, led by Rob Gray, was going to knock them off, if not for that miracle shot. And oh, by the way, that was the same Michigan team that ended up going all the way to the national title game and finished as runners-up to Villanova. So it's going to be a very exciting week for college basketball, and the first of many if you're a college basketball fan. So we will, of course, have all the updates from the Cougs as they get set to head just up 45. Again, the American Athletic Conference tournament being played in Fort Worth at Dickies Arena. We also want to give a shout out to the Houston Baptist women's team, who over the weekend won the outright Southland Conference title. It is the first outright regular season title for any HBU team. So shout out to them. They will be the top seed in the Southland Conference tourney, which is, as always, being held right here in Houston. It's at the Merrill Center out in Katy, just on the other side of I-10 from Katy Mills. So shout out to the HBU ladies, and they will see how deep they can make things, and can they lock up that AQ and get themselves into the dance over on the women's side. So again, no baseball to talk about because they're still in the lockout, and based on all the reports, does not look like it's ending anytime soon. We saw the combine wrap up, and while head coach Lovie Smith and GM Nick Caserio spoke with reporters, they didn't really tell us anything we didn't already know. No further updates on if and when and how Deshaun Watson will be traded. Are they going to draft a quarterback high? What is the future for Davis Mills? It's everything you've heard. So we don't need to get deep into any of that. So we will, of course, have more on the Rockets, who, as I mentioned, are in action right now. One final check of them before we sign off here. 48-39 Houston, 5:54 left in the first half. So we will have those highlights for you tonight on Fox 26 News at 9. We will also hear from the Atascocita boys basketball team. They are heading back to the state tourney after winning the 6A Region 3 title this past weekend. It's the second year in a row that the Eagles have made it this far. They will play Friday night in San Antonio at the Alamodome against Duncanville, who some people consider one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the entire country. And so a very tough task for Atascocita. So I was at practice today. We will hear what they had to say as they get set to head back to states for the second year in a row. As always, for all the updates, everything most up to the minute on what's going on in the Houston sports scene, make sure you are following our sports director, Mark Berman, on social media. You can find him on Twitter. His handle is @MarkBerman, Fox26. We'll do this again until next Monday night, again, just after 7 o'clock. I'm Sal Manine. Take care.